Díomh Choláiste hÍde, is mis tar de bret ó bliana cuaig agus tá an seo le Hannah Nic Andreas ó bliana sé. Iniu bé ag leabhar le Niall Breslin nó Bressie. Is ceoltóir é a bhí páirtí don grúpa de Blizzards agus freisin dimar sé pell agus rugby. Beidir gur le tú a leabhar ó dopáistí, The Magic Moment agus Take 5. nó beidir go nation tú leis an podcréile, Where is My Mind? So, Bressie, we have a few questions for you based on music and sport and how you've been coping with well-being throughout the lockdown.
Brilliant.
And
looking forward to it.
the first question we have down here is that I heard during the first lockdown you gave out 200 ukuleles and were given ukulele like classes. What inspired you to do so?
Do you know the thing about it is the silliest ideas in life are often the best ones. And that was a silly idea. That was me. I remember when Leo Varadkar was announcing the first lockdown, and I came home to cocoon my parents down here in Mullingar. And I remember just looking at them, and they're both over 70 and going, they're being told that they can't leave their homes. And I'm like, God, how difficult would it be to hear that? To be, the fear and to be told you're that vulnerable must have been really scary for them. So I bought my mum a ukulele. She was a music teacher, so she plays violin. And she's got arthritis, so she can't really play her instrument anymore, but ukulele's a little easier in the hands. So I bought her one, and I was upstairs every day and I could hear her strumming away. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be nice to get a few more of these for people who might be cocooning around Ireland? And then I rang Music Maker in Dublin and I said, how many ukuleles do you have? And they said, I've never been asked that question before in my life. And they said, I have 40. And I went, I'll take them. And then that 40 turned into actually 450 we ended up giving out in the end. It went to 200 and then to 450, and we sent them out to 450 people cocooning, or not just people over 70, but people with vulnerable health conditions. And then Justin, who's a guitar player in the Blizzards, I said, listen, can you give lessons to these? He's a guitar. Can you give lessons to these guys on YouTube or something? So we set that up. And then over the 6 weeks, we taught them how to play the ukulele. And then we recorded a song called The Lockdown Ukulele Rockdown. And we did a music video. We shot it all in Mullingar. We got people to send in videos of themselves playing it. And it really was just to occupy their attention in what was an immensely terrifying time for people who were being told they can't leave their homes. Like, that is just such a difficult thing to hear, and that's where that silly idea started. And to be honest with you, if you asked me would I do it again, I absolutely wouldn't, because it was the most ironically stressful thing I've ever done in my life.
That's absolutely amazing. I started ukulele myself like around when I heard, but I was a bit late coming in, but it was a really interesting story to hear when I first came across it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't like ukulele. It's a great little instrument. So and you can make any song sound nice with the ukulele. So keep playing it. And it's actually really hard to be really good at it. So it's keep rocking the ukulele.
I will. Another question I have based on music is, as a musician yourself, what other musicians or music would you look up to? Like, what would be your influence?
For me, my big love of music grew in the 90s, which would have been grunge music and kind of rock music and what I used to call garage band music, where it would be right now, whatever you listen to is all produced in a studio. It's by producers. Sometimes I don't even know if there's humans there anymore. It's become so, it's great and all, but it isn't bands. Bands started off in grimy garages with crappy instruments and crappy amps and didn't really know what they were doing, and over a few years they started to gel together and build together. And that's the music I love, because there's a real vulnerability to it, there's an anger to it, there's much more humanity to it, there's mistakes in it, it doesn't seem perfect, and human beings are not perfect. And that is why we find ourselves drawn towards music that isn't perfect, because it kind of outlines what we are. Human beings are built imperfectly, we're designed imperfectly. So grunge music and bands like Pearl Jam, and bands where lyrics were incredibly important. And now, there's always been pop music, but it doesn't mean anything to me anymore. And maybe that's because I'm old, but it's not saying anything. Like, how many people can you break up with? Imagine we took out breakup songs and said, you're not allowed to write about breakups anymore. There'd be no songs left. So I think there's more important things to be singing about sometimes. And that's why I love 90s grunge music, because it just says something to me, and it connected to me when I was a teenager. And my hero, my absolute hero, was Kurt Cobain, who died of suicide at 27 years of age. And I asked my teacher on that day what happened, and he punched the desk and called him a coward. And that was my mental health education. And I was in the midst of hell myself at that point. I was struggling with serious panic disorder. And to hear that broke my heart. Could you imagine someone like Ed Sheeran died that way now, the impact it would have on the youth? And we'd have to really support young people through that. That's how I was supported. So, you know, that to me, I always remember that day and how much I loved them, and the anger and the energy of youth. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I've definitely noticed that, especially like with nowadays, most of the songs we hear are about breakup or about love. And definitely in the olden days, they were a lot more creative with it. So there's been a massive, massive change. I'd say everyone can say the same.
Yeah, I'm not that old now, Tara. Be careful. The olden days, it's not like the 60s now, and I'm my hippie clothes and the Beatles. But yeah, no, I do feel the classic songs that we would have listened to, 30, 40, 50 years ago, we're still listening to them because there's something special about them and there's something vulnerable about them. And that is good music to me. Good music. I own a recording studio. Good music to me isn't perfect. It's a bit out of tune. You can feel the emotion from whoever's delivering it. And that's the most important part of music. That's what music is.
Mm-hmm.
So we also have here, you played rugby and Gaelic football for some time. And we have a few questions on that. Like, what would be your daily routine while playing rugby or football?
Well, I was a Gaelic player. I wasn't a rugby player. I just realised at about 16 years of age, I could move to Dublin and beat up posh Dublin school kids. So I started to play rugby. But I was a Gaelic player. Like, I was born bred. And Gaelic to me was such a simple sport. And it is such a simple sport. And rugby is quite a complex sport. So I started playing rugby seriously about 16 years of age. And then I represented Ireland when I was doing my leaving cert at the Under-19s World Cup. And that kind of, at that time, I had to make the decision. Did I want to become a professional athlete, or did I want to keep playing Gaelic football? And it broke my heart because I adore Gaelic football. And ultimately, I was offered a scholarship. And my dad, who had put 4 people through college already, said, I ain't paying for you anymore. I don't have the money. So if you have a scholarship, you're taking the second scholarship. So I took it. And that led me into playing for the Irish Under-21s at the World Cup, and then get offered a full-time professional contract with Leinster. And the thing about it was, it's an intense job, but the problem with me at that point, I was diagnosed in my mid-20s with clinical depression, and this was the start of it. So I was trying to function in training. I was trying to walk in training. I was trying to play matches, and some nights I just wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I wasn't washing myself. It's quite serious. And trying to maintain a professional sporting world was the toughest thing I've ever done in my life. And I was tough. And that's the thing about mental health, is there's this genuine kind of weird stereotype around people who struggle with mental health issues, that they're weak or they're broken. The toughest people I know, literally the toughest feckers I know, are people who struggle with their mental health, because they have to be, because little things can really challenge them, like getting out of bed. I know, and that's not being overly dramatic. So for me, my professional rugby days were slightly tainted by the fact that I wasn't well. And I remember one day turning up to training and my hair started to fall out. In clumps, just started to fall out onto my lap. And that's when I knew that mental health issues are very physical. Your body and your mind are completely linked. They're the same thing. And I knew at that point that I think I'm going to have to retire because I wasn't well. And it broke my heart, but I had to take care of my mental health. And although I loved being a professional athlete, I loved the idea of it, I loved the money, it wasn't worth how unwell I was at the time.
Is there anything that you miss or don't miss about playing sport, like now?
Oh, it's irreplaceable is the buzz of walking in front of God knows how many thousand people. It's irreplaceable. It's the only, I was lucky that I could replace it with gigs and playing live music. A lot of people don't have that. But what I miss with sport, what I really miss, was just knowing that my body could do mad things. Like I could, you're trained so rigorously, you're trained so hard that you realize that you're capable of so much physically. But I wasn't mentally, and that was the problem. And that's when I realized that the mind is far more important than the body. The need to invest in your head is more important than the need to invest in your body. It will follow. Your body will follow if you can get this lad in order. So for me, I miss that intensity of playing a match and how time stood still for that 90 minutes or 80 minutes. I miss the aggression of it. I do think sometimes you need to release that aggression. I think holding it inside all the time is not healthy. And that can be many different things. It could be a run, it could be a walk, it could be punching a punch bag. But for me, it was playing matches at elite level where you really had to just pin your ears back. And I love that. I really miss it.
Yeah, I'd say you would. Like I play camogie and I am itching to get back onto the pitch. Like it's really, really annoying me. And following up on the last question here on sport, do you think there's too much pressure put on young rugby players today?
I think rugby is going to have to change. I think we have to stop ignoring the fact that so many players are getting knocked out in matches. The reality is rugby players are getting literally stronger and stronger and faster and more powerful, and these collisions are getting bigger and bigger. And I genuinely have a concern for it now. If I had a young child, would I want them playing rugby at the moment? I probably wouldn't, to be perfectly honest. So things are going to have to change. I think there's a huge level of pressure on young people within sport and body image. I think that's a really important one. And I have to be perfectly honest. The one thing I would massively advocate is young people shouldn't be doing weights, because there was one answer to me that in Gaelic football, the best coach I ever had was Gaelic footballer coach, Bernard Flynn. He used to play for Meath. And he used to say to me, Niall, there's no answer to pace. Pace is what it's about. You can be as big as you want. So I remember at 15, 16, you had all these lads doing weights all the time because they wanted to look good, but didn't make them better rugby player or a better Gaelic player. It made them slower. Their bodies weren't ready to put on that level of weight. And I think that is something we have to talk about because, the work that I do with the Lust for Life, we see a lot of people with an eating disorder issues, and the growing prevalence of eating disorders among men now is massive. It's huge. It is growing much, much quicker. Part of that is around sport. Part of it around is the fact that we have these impossibly high standards that we're trying to keep people towards. So for me, sport is, especially rugby, we need to rethink this. It's not working. And the one thing I'm going to say to you about sport, and any who love sport here, sport is one of the greatest things in the world. But what we're doing to now is sport has become a business, and it's become less about sport every single day. And it's become about measurement. Sports scientists, they measure everything. If you bloody fart at 3 a.m, they'll know about it. Everything is measured in elite sport now. And the problem with that is there's nothing left for that beautiful part of sport, which is just, you don't know what's going to happen. That dog, that raw dog that you have and you're playing camogie and you don't know you're capable of it and something comes out. You can't measure that stuff and you shouldn't try. And I think sport is becoming too measured, too business orientated, and we're losing the essence of what sport really is. And I hope that stops because I'm sick of watching. All we're watching now is corporate businesses growing in front of us. We're not watching sport anymore. And that is not why I got into sport. And that's not why I love sport.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Like, I wouldn't be much of a rugby fanatic or anything like that, but my family definitely are. I'd hear them shouting at the television a lot. And
I love it, Tara, and it's been amazing to Ireland. It's an amazing sport. It is an amazing sport, and it's one of the most. It's given us so much joy over the years, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't look at certain aspects of it and how we can change it. Like 15, 16-year-olds getting those types of head collisions. Like I remember in one season being concussed 4 times. I couldn't tell you my name for a few days after it. How much damage has that done? I don't know, because back when I was playing, we really didn't take it that seriously. And I remember getting, no joke, I got concussed in a match and I meowed. I was meowing like a cat for 30 minutes and nobody thought this was weird. And like I actually was on the side of the pitch meowing, and my coach was just rubbing my head every now and again to tell me I was okay. I thought I was a cat. You know what I mean? That's not normal, and it probably explains a lot about my head, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Hannah, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I was interested to hear about your the influence that grunge music had on you. You have a podcast called Where Is My Mind, which is a reference to the song by the Pixies, obviously. Could you tell us a bit about that podcast and what inspired you to make it, really, and what you talk about on it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the song, the Pixies were another band that I loved growing up. They were quite they were melancholy, they were weird, they were odd. To be honest, when I was a teenager, I felt that way. But because I was an athlete, I kind of felt I had to wear this mask, but really I was much more in that world of like everything felt weird to me. I didn't feel within my own body sometimes. And the Pixies used to sing about that a lot, and I used to love it. But that song, Where's My Mind, is one of the greatest rock songs ever written. And when I started the podcast, I remember thinking, what do I want to talk about? And what I wanted to talk about was two things: psychology and culture. Now, every single thing that affects your heads, guys, not just teenagers, but me, we are massively influenced by our culture. And right now, our culture is not that well. And it is constantly inflicting pretty much a lot of bad stuff on us and making us feel pretty worthless sometimes, because it gets a lot of money when it makes us feel bad, because it's good for business when we feel a little bit shit about ourselves. And I'm really interested. My academic background was sociology. So I did my master's in sociology, then in mindfulness and psychology. And it's where the two of them meet that I'm really interested. And that is what the podcast is about. How is our culture influencing us? How can we better arm ourselves to deal with the hostile elements of culture? Because there's so many amazing parts of culture. But as we grow up, we're constantly told that certain things matter. And as I got older, I realized those things mean nothing. They're not important. And what really became important to me as I grew up was connection, who I connected to. Like, who within my circle am I deeply aligned to and connected to? And when I'm with them, I give them everything I have. I give them my presence. And I realized that's where my happiness came from. It didn't come from achievement. It didn't come from goals. It didn't come from being the best version of myself. It came from connecting to people. And that's what the podcast is about. And the reason I do love grunge music, and some of you mightn't have listened to much of it, listen to the lyrics. There's a song from Pearl Jam called Release Me. If you do anything, go and listen to the lyrics of that song. And when you start to hear these types of songs, you can't unhear them. And you hear something special about it. And I'm a music producer. And I remember a record label coming into my studio one day and going, nobody cares about lyrics anymore. I said, they don't care about lyrics until they hear a good one. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, that's poetry. So that to me, with the Pixies and the Pearl Jams, it was poetry. It wasn't just music. And it was basically communicating exactly how I felt. And I wasn't able to communicate it because I didn't know what it was. At 1995, 96, no one ever talked about panic disorder or general anxiety disorder. We used to just say you're going to be put into St. Lomans, which is a psychiatric hospital in Mullingar. That's all I was told. So I never spoke about it. And it felt like the music was communicating how I was feeling. And right now, when I listen to modern music, I don't know what it's communicating. Is it really telling us anything? Is it really getting into the soul of how we feel, our emotions? And maybe it does sometimes. That number one at the moment, the driver's license song, is stunning. It's beautiful. I believe every bloody word. It's so touching and it's so emotionally delivered. And that is why it's so successful. But then there's songs and you're like, this is just trying to honor an algorithm on Spotify. They're fitting into boxes. So music is, to me, is the most important part of my life.
Right. And obviously connection, like you mentioned, is very important. So whether it be like connection with your friends or with music, we're in a time, at the moment, it's very hard for young people to be connecting with anything because, nobody really knows what's going on with lockdown. A lot of people are disheartened. So I'd just like to know, what are your tips for kind of keeping yourself well during lockdown? And what are you doing to keep, yourself okay?
Well, do you know the funny thing, Hannah? Do you know what our culture did, or what we started calling young people who are now starting to talk about things like connection and emotion? Do you know what we did? We labeled these snowflakes. That is just a label given by a broken nation that has never addressed the things that ye are starting to address now. And ye are the generation who can finally destroy the stigma that it is very best to destroy my generation and more. It really did. We weren't allowed even mention this stuff. So my passion is is supporting and facilitating the youth, because they're the only people in the world showing leadership right now. And connection is at the core of that. And the other thing that we do as adults is we make young people's issues or problems less important than ours, but they're not less important than ours. Oh, we have to pay a mortgage. Who cares? You know, you might have different responsibilities, but for me, pain is pain. And one of the best ways to address it is deep connection with people, is having that friend that you can just sit with for an hour and not need to talk and feel uncomfortable with, that you don't need to feel like you need to be anything other than you are. That's really important. And when that's taken away from us, it leaves a big void, and it's really difficult. But human beings are immensely adaptive. We will adapt back to that, and it will hurt a little bit. But the best thing I would suggest in terms of taking care of your heads in this madness that we're in, you often hear people talking about compassion. Compassion isn't about Care Bears and unicorns and everything's lovely and fluffy and positive. Well, that's not what compassion is. Real compassion is recognizing that every human being on this earth is flawed. We are built broke. Like, there's a beautiful quote by Leonard Cohen that said, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. There's cracks in all of us. We are all fecked up. Every single one of us are fecked up in some way. We have our own quirks, our own issues, our own problems. Compassion is about bringing some love to that, a bit of kindness to the fact that we're flawed, that we're imperfect beings living in an imperfect world that gets judged for imperfection. It doesn't make any sense. So for me, the ability to bring compassion to your cracks, to the pain, to the stuff that makes us human beings. I heard Philly talking about his brother. His brother didn't find a way to bring compassion to that. And ultimately, he struggled because he lived in a culture that didn't allow him get help or stigmatized his issues. And this is the reality. So if the one thing I will say to you is find a way to bring some kindness to the fact that you're a little fecked up, because I am, and everyone else in the world is. And that is the best way. And also let this hurt. This isn't meant to be easy. This is tough as it gets. And one thing I will say to you is, everyone listening to this, please don't see this as 12 months wasted, because over the last 12 months, you've built a lived experience that will stand to you on every other inevitable crap stuff that comes your way in life. You'll be well able for it because you've just gone through a pandemic. That's as tough as it gets. So you've been armed, you've been given the tools to deal with this stuff, and it will stand with you throughout all the other stuff in life that comes your way, because life isn't a straight line.
Very well answered. So, of course, it's been tough for teenagers in every generation, you could say, to feel like they're normal, or, you know, there's always been the struggle to fit in or feel like they have to change. Do you think that it's harder for teenagers nowadays with, you know, the impact that social media has on everyone and how everybody feels like they constantly have to be, you know, seen in a certain way? Like, what's your opinion on social media?
My honest opinion is, knowing what I went through as a teenager and how much I struggled, I don't know how I would have been able to deal with that. It's so intense. Mm-hmm. It is so skewed, and it basically plays off the cracks that I talk about. It plays off that and exploits them. I have more positive feelings for the youth now, because finally we have a generation that knows how to communicate their emotions, how they're feeling. To a point, they're able to communicate it now. They can talk to people about it. Then, you know, I didn't even have the language, Hannah. I didn't know how to tell people what was wrong with me. I thought I had asthma. I was tested for asthma 3 times as a teenager because I couldn't breathe, because I fought for every breath every night. So I couldn't even tell you what was wrong, but now you know. So that's a really important thing to point out. But social media has many benefits, but it plays off the algorithm. So if you look at all the tech CEOs of the major tech companies around the world, none of them let their children on social media. None of them. That surely is telling you something. So social media can work, but you need boundaries. You need to know how to use it. And the one thing I would say around social media, the thing I'm most worried about is the fact that we're refusing to have conversations and dialogue and debate. If Hannah has a different opinion to me, I must hate her. I must cancel her. I cannot be in it. That is not going to progress society. That is not progression. And we've created this belief that just canceling people who have a different opinion to you is going to make us much more woke. It isn't. It's actually going to suffocate conversation. So every person you see who has a different opinion to you, see them as an opportunity to change how they think about the world. Don't see them as somebody you just push and dismiss. So that's an important. Barack Obama said it. Shouting at someone on Twitter isn't being woke. It isn't activism. I've been working in the area of mental health for 8 years. I most days curse myself for doing it because it's tough work. And the people that I disagree with are my audience, not the people that agree with me. They're the people you need to change opinions of. And that is the one area I'll say, if people listening to this wants to get into the area of activism around climate change, around mental health, around transgender and LGBT social causes, your audience isn't the people who agree with you. You already have them. It's your audience is the people who don't agree with you. So don't cancel them. See them as an opportunity to change their opinions, and then you have an ally. And the strongest person on earth is a person who's changed their opinion on a social issue, because they'll believe in it even more. And I think that is the one thing I would say to young people. You're showing huge leadership in social changes and social causes, but it is much more than just cancelling people you don't agree with. And some people are just arseholes, Hannah, and sometimes you just need to let them go and forget about them. Some people don't want to learn, but most people, if you give them a chance, want to learn or want to know more or want to hear your side of the story. And that is how we progress society. And that's how social media can be used properly. And it is used properly. We saw with Black Lives Matters, we saw with the marriage equality campaign, we saw with Repeal the Eighth. It was used pretty well. And it managed to work. And Ireland is now seen as one of the most liberal countries in Europe, which is hilarious, considering how conservative we were when I was growing up.
And still are, you might say. I mean, we're very...
Yeah.
There's still a lot of, religious stigma in the country, I would say, and it kind of impacts.
But you see with that, Hannah, and the important point to point, that's a really good point. And it's important to point out that a lot of some of those stigmas that do exist still are people who've been exposed to that for generations. It's very hard to change them overnight or to change their opinions overnight. We can't fast forward that stuff. So for example, yourself and maybe myself, we're kind of used to the more liberal approach to life because we grew up where, the 60s and 70s, we were still putting in 80s women in prisons if they had children out of wedlock. That is draconian stigmas. So some people who went through that, they won't change overnight, but they are changing. And they mightn't be changing at the same pace as everybody else, but every conversation counts. And that's how the marriage equality campaign actually, that campaign took 14 years. I worked with the team who put that together because I'm working with them to help me with the mental health stuff I'm doing. And they said that took 14 years. That did not happen in one day in May. And 14 years ago, they sat down and they sat around a table and they said, how do we convince the Irish mammy? How do we convince her that their daughter or their husband or their son, that equality isn't just a line, it isn't just a word in our proclamation. Equality is a mindset, and you can't pick and choose where you believe in it. You either believe in equality or you don't. There's no middle ground with it. You either believe that we're all born equal or you don't. And that's equality. And that was 14 years. So some of the other issues that we're seeing now won't change overnight, but they're changing. And we got to be positive about that.
Right. I think Tara might have some more uplifting, lighthearted questions now about.
I thought that was very uplifting, Anna. I enjoyed it.
Very, very hopeful. Yeah.
Just one question. Lockdown.
I'm kind of losing Tara a little bit.
She's frozen, isn't she?
She and the old internet up in Dublin's not working well, lads. You should come down to the sticks down the Midlands. We've got great internet. She'll come back in, but yeah, no, I think overall, Anna, it is. Is she back there, Tara? Have we got you?
Yeah, I'm back.
Oh, there we got you. Yeah, brilliant. How are you getting on?
Sorry. I have one question, lockdown based. Is there anything any new hobbies or anything in general that you picked up on while in lockdown for several months that you never thought you'd pick up?
No, and here's the thing, right? Everyone felt that they should achieve something new in lockdown or they should do something new. I got really good at sitting on my arse and not feeling guilty about it. Literally sitting on and not doing anything and not having to achieve anything And that felt good, I have to be honest with you, because all my life, I feel I always, if I sit down for a minute, I go, oh, I should be doing something. I was like, no, I'm doing nothing. I'm actually going to just sit here and not care. And I felt that was really nice. It's a skill in the modern world. It's a real skill to be able to do that. And also, really importantly, to point out what I did pick up, I started to read. I read a lot. But what I did, I went back to the old classics that I might have read when I was in school, like Alice in Wonderland and Gulliver's Travels, and books that I probably wouldn't have picked up on the kind of nuances when I was reading them at 12 or 13 years of age. And I started to reread all the old classic books. And what that did, it just brought me into this different world. So the more intense the world got outside, I went into this fantasy world and started reading these books. And I'd spend an hour, 2 hours a day just reading Alice in Wonderland. Like, that book is mad. It's mental. And I missed about 90% of what it was about, really, when I read it first time. So that was one thing I picked up much more. I spend an awful lot of time reading, and also an awful lot of time in nature. I adore nature. It just lifts my heart. It's just to be outside, not doing anything, walking, breathing, feeling, there's nothing like a kind of a southwest wind cutting the arse off you in January to make you feel alive. You know what I mean? So really, do you know what happened? Do you know where I really found quality? It was in simple things. I reverted back to simple things. I don't need the big things anymore. I've been living with my mum and dad now for 12 months. When will anyone who's just turned 40 years of age get a chance to do that again? I turned 40 the same day as Kim Kardashian. She went to a private island with her mates. I had macaroni cheese with my mum, and I win. Is she there? She's frozen again.
Gone again, is she?
There is a question there, advice for teenage self. That's a really interesting one, because I have been commissioned to write a piece for St. Patrick's Day this year, the festival. And I decided to title the piece Teen Spirit. And it was about that moment when I found out Kurt Cobain died, and my teacher said that to me. And I went back to myself in the classroom that day in this spoken word piece with the advice that I wish I was told when I was 15 years of age, when my hero died. And I really acknowledge how much has changed. And there's a line in it that says, not everybody's intention is to hurt you. Look past their behaviors and words. Maybe they were hurt too. And not everyone's intention is to offend you. We all learn at our own pace, even if that sometimes frustrates you. And that's a really important. If somebody is being mean to you or saying something, there might be a reason for it. There might be something going on in their life. Something might have happened to them. They might be in huge pain themselves. And unfortunately, they're just passing that pain on. So that takes huge emotional intelligence. And that's the stuff that I wish I knew as a teenager, the ability to recognize that most people are nice, and I think that's an important point.
Nobody goes out of their way to kind of make life bad for other people. It's always something they've been conditioned or something that they've gone through.
They're passing it on.
That way. Of course.
Oh, yeah, Tara.
Hiya, I'm back.
Brilliant. We got you.
Eventually, yeah.
All good. I can hear you perfectly though, so it's all good.
I think she's gone again, is she?
She's in but if you want and Tara, if you can hear me, you can put the question in the private chat as well, and I can answer it there because I can see it there. But it's yeah, that's so keep an eye out for the Teen Spirit spoken word piece on Patrick's Day, but it was essentially me speaking to my 15-year-old self.
Okay. We've gone over time.
Have we? I do talk a lot. But above everything, what I will say before I finish, guys, is the most effective form of support in this world within any form of issue is peer support, the ability to turn to friends, families, and not to be judged. If you can do that, and if somebody turns to you as a friend and tells you something that they're struggling, see that as the greatest compliment you'll ever be given, because they obviously see you as a good person that can hold that. Your job isn't to fix that person. Your job is just to not judge them. And I always call it the emotional scaffolding. I say to my friends, I'm here. You can hold on to me if you need me. I'm not going to keep asking you, but if you need me, I'm here. And that's during this lockdown, that's what we need right now, is emotional scaffolding.
Right, that's a lot of very powerful and insightful things that you have to say. Thank you very much for talking to us. It was really nice to be able to do this, and yeah.
Pleasure. Go listen to the Pixies. Thanks a million, guys. Appreciate it all.
Thanks very much.
Take care. Bye bye.